Thanks for joining me for the second part of this series where we talk about the role of different lights in portrait lighting setups. In our previous video, we talked about the role and purpose of the key light, the first and most important light of most portrait lighting setups. And in this video, we're going to cover the role of a second light. Okay, so a second light. Why do we need two lights if the key light is doing the really important work? Well, yeah, your key light is your main light. But that second light can be used as a fill light to reduce contrast. Now remember, your key light is coming from one direction and it is going to create shadows on the opposite side of your subject's figure or face. Well, that second light used as a fill light will help to fill in some of those shadows and thus reduce contrast. Now, the second light doesn't have to be used as a fill light. Sometimes you use that second light as a hair light. You know, these are the accent lights, the hair light, the rim light, and these help separate your subject from the background. Other uses for a second light, you could be, instead of using your key light in the usual placement, you could put your one light on one side of your subject and your second light on the direct opposite side of your subject for a double side light effect. This is pretty useful, especially in physique type images. I also like to use a second light in a cross lighting pattern where you have your key light on one side of your subject and that second light will come in directly opposite on the other side of your subject. And I'll show you an example of that in a little while. You can also use a second light in clamshell lighting, and that is where instead of having your key light and your fill light sort of horizontal to your subject, you just flip it over 90 degrees and your key light is up on top and your fill light is underneath your subject's face. This kind of lighting is often used for glamour lighting or headshots. And you can also use that second light as a background light. Now, in a real working scenario, you might have your second light play the role of fill light, and you'll use another light for a hair light and another light for a background light. We'll talk about that in a few moments too. All right, so let's talk about the fill light role. Now, the fill light, like I said, controls contrast. You can see here where the leftmost image shows a lot of contrast. You've got your key light over on the camera right. The middle picture shows a little less contrast, and then the picture on the right almost shows a flat looking lighting. And let's take a look at how that's done. Over here on the left, I've got a foam core board. I'm using it as a reflector, and sometimes I hang these up and I place them really near the subject to act as a second light. Now, you don't always need another light to fill in the shadows. Sometimes you can use a reflector, either a foam core board like I am using here, or a traditional reflector, often shaped like a circle. All right, so you can see, again, the leftmost picture, that foam core board is about 2 feet away from our subject on camera left, and it's filling in the shadows just a bit. Over here in the middle, I've moved the board a little closer, and you can see where it's filling in the shadows pretty well. And then on the right, I've got that board really close, like 12 inches away, and it's really reflecting a lot of light from the key light back onto the subject's face on that shadow side. Now, of course, this is using a foam core board as an example, but what we're talking about is using a second light. And so quite often the second light is like the one I'm showing here. It's just another flash with a modifier on it, in this case an umbrella modifier. And lots of times this fill light will be a little more in the horizontal position rather than pointing down like this. You can see here, this time we've got the key light over on camera left, which is the brighter side of the portrait. And this first image here says no fill, so we're not using that flash with the umbrella modifier. Picture in the middle, we're using the second light on camera right to fill in a little bit of the shadow area. And the power is about half the power of the key light. So we have a pretty good effect here. And over here on the right, the fill light is a quarter power of the key light. So when you're putting your portrait together, you're going to decide kind of how, based on how things look, how much contrast you want to cut in these images. Lots of times I like no fill at all, but sometimes you need a little fill to make things look good. Let's get into more detail about lighting placement for that fill light. You can see I've got that key light over here on the right, and I've got the fill light on the left. Now the fill light in this diagram, it could be a little lower. This is okay, but it could be a little lower. Lots of times the key light is much higher than the fill light. How's the key light positioned? Just as we talked about in the last video, we've got it about 45 degrees off camera to subject axis. So that's to one side, pointed down toward the subject. And the fill light is going to be on the opposite side. It's going to be on the shadow side. And this can be lower, more in line with the subject's head. Another use for that second light is as a rim or a kicker light, sometimes it's called. And what the purpose of this light is to highlight the contours. You can see in our example here, the key light's on camera left on our model, and you see this little highlight on her contours here on the right-hand side, and in her hair, you've got a little bit of light on her hair and her hair on her shoulder and going down her arm. And what this does is it outlines the contours. It provides some separation from the background, and it just basically adds some interest. It gives the image some pop. It gives it some dimension. Lighting placement for a rim or kicker. Well, first you can see in our illustration that the key light is again on the right-hand side, and we've got our flash modified with a strip box to serve as our rim or kicker. And this is placed behind and to one side of the subject. Really doesn't matter what side you have it on. Lots of times I like to use an accent light, whether it's a background light or a rim light like this, sort of opposite the key light. Another thing you can use that second light for is a hair light. And what this basically does is it adds a little life to the hair. It adds sparkle, glossiness. It also provides separation from the background. So if your background's kind of dark and the hair is kind of dark, then hair light adds a little bit of separation, which can be helpful. Lots of times because of the placement of the hair light, it can also highlight the tops of the shoulders. And depending on how you have it angled, it can serve as a combination hair light and kicker. So you can see at the image up here at the top, we're using it primarily as a hair light. So the light is coming in straight from the top. You can see here in the lower portrait, the hair light is coming in high and from one side. And if you were able to pan down the full length of that picture, you'd see that that light is able to actually reach most of the figure, and you'd also get that sort of a rim or kicker effect. Classic placement for the hair light looks like this. Again, you've got your key light on one side and your hair light coming in straight from above. It can be 2 or 3 feet above the subject's head. And finally, we can use that second light as a background light to add interest to the background. Now, background light basically provides illumination for backdrops and environments. Now, the effects that you can create with a background light, if you've got a white background, you can make it more white. You can create a clean white background. You can do gradations like we're showing here in the example. You can add gels to that light and have color effects. You can use a cookie to create patterns. Lots of things you can do by hitting your background with another light. And in this case, in this example, we've got an orange gel over our background light, and we don't have it flagged or anything. So some of that light is doing double duty as sort of a hair light and a rim light, and it has a really cool effect this way. And here's an illustration showing the placement of that background light. Now, in that example I just showed you, the key light was over on camera left and the background light was on camera right. And I think you can make that out. In our illustration here, we're just leaving the key light where it's been for all of our examples and just plugging in this background light over here on the right. And yeah, you can place your background light just about anywhere you want, as long as it's creating, all you need it to do is create the effect that you need it to create. Again, sometimes a gradation, sometimes you just want the entire background to be illuminated evenly. And sometimes you need a couple of lights to do that, but in this case, we're just talking about adding one extra light. And just for reference, here is a slide that we used in our previous video that kind of details how a light is set up on a light stand with a modifier. And so you might remember this is an umbrella modifier that we're showing here, which you might actually use for a fill light, even if you're using a softbox as your key. Sometimes your fill light's going to be another softbox. As for light power and settings, your fill light is usually going to be about half the power or intensity of the key light. It might be less, it might be more. Lots of times, the intensity is one thing and the power setting is another, because if you bring that light a little farther back, it's going to be a little less intense even at the same power setting. In the past, a lot of the lighting power ratios were determined with the aid of a flash meter or a light meter of some sort. These days, we just kind of go on feel, a little bit of experience and a little bit of just looking at the viewfinder after you take a test shot and kind of determining if you want to dial some power up or down. If you're using that second light as a hair light or a rim light, generally you want that more intense than the key light because you're looking for highlights. You're looking for sometimes specular highlights. And so you want that light fairly bright. And if you're using it for the background, you're just going to have to adjust it for the effect that you want. Now, I think this video gave you a pretty good overview of what you can do with the second light, but there is a lot more to learn about flash photography, and you've got to put it all together. I recommend that you get my handy flash reference guide covering all the important topics. It's called Ed Vorosky's Guide to Flash Photography, and it'll talk about how light works in photography, understanding camera and flash exposure, very important. Flash gear and concepts, also very important. We're going to cover on-camera flash techniques, which can give you some really good professional-looking portraits if you know what you're doing. And, of course, off-camera flash techniques, like the kind we're talking about in this video. So make sure you grab a copy of this guide. I'll have a link in the description below. So for your next steps, I recommend that you start with fill lighting, okay? And practice controlling contrast in your portraits with a reflector first, and then move on to using flash with a modifier to reduce those shadows. Try using different distances too so that you can really get a feel for how distance affects intensity of that light on your subject. Start learning how you can use that second light to create highlights and background illumination. Use your second light as a rim or kicker. Try it out as a hair light, and definitely experiment with a second light on your background. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this mini course on using a second light in your flash portraiture. Now, don't forget to download my guide. It's a great way to have an easy reference on you at all times as you continue to learn all about flash photography. The link to that guide is in the description below.